appreciate you sharing a little bit about, your background and your mother. So how was it for you, like you said, coming from, a matriarch background with a Black mom? How was it for you when you came out?
The good thing is that my family did not meet me with any hostility. And I think that I had the fortune of having a grandfather from the South Bronx who was a very, he's the man of the house. He's the man of the house, right? And he sets the tone, although we are a matriarchal home, there's respect and deference given to the man of the home, right? So my grandfather set the tone of the energy, and he was protected growing up by his very flamboyant older gay cousin, who protected him, looked out for him, showed him the streets, showed him how to fight, because, the gays in the Bronx don't play, okay? You gonna squad with them gays. And my grandfather was a beneficiary of the compassion and the love and the support of a older gay cousin. And so I think that opened up his sense of sympathy and empathy and understanding that poured over into my grandmother. That is how my mother was raised. And so I was greeted with an amazing amount of understanding. In fact, my mother and my grandmother, when my mother told my grandmother that I came out, I heard my grandmother on the phone in the background. She says, "Oh, finally. We were just waiting on you." And I laughed, and that was warm. And my grandfather's rubber stamped that, and they humanized me right off the bat. Now, let's go to Act 2, which is my father, who is Latino.
Say I go in, well, not me, but say, family member of mine that, a male goes in, what should he expect? Like, what's he expecting when he goes in to get his prostate checked?
So initially, the screening process will start at the age of 50, generally. However, depending on your family history, you may want to get the prostate cancer screening test earlier. If you have a first degree relative, a brother, father, uncle, that have prostate cancer, you may want to start getting it, or it's okay to get the test or request the test as early as 40. Okay. So early as 40, 45. Now, if your PSA is less than 1 at the age 40, then you're pretty safe to not necessarily have the test every year. You probably can go every other year if it's less than 1. But if you're 40, because your PSA is going to increase, this test is going to increase as your prostate grows, because the prostate makes the PSA. And so as you get older, your prostate grows, is making more PSA, and that's normal. What you don't want to see is a spike in the PSA where the velocity or the every year, say it goes from 2 to like 6 in a year, and you haven't had an infection, or you're just going in for your regular test, that raises eyebrows.
And so looking at our data, looking at disparities, persons of color are more likely to have these negative health outcomes. And the question is why? There are no genetic differences between racial ethnic groups. So why would being a person of color put us at a greater risk? And what we recognize is that our social experiences, experiencing racism, experiencing discrimination, that those not only change the way our body functions, so it impacts us internally, but it also impacts our mental health. It impacts us in so many different ways that ultimately result in our increased risk for chronic disease, increased risk for mental illness, increased risk, or not an increased risk, but lower life expectancy compared to our counterparts. And so we're at a point now where everybody sees it, everybody knows it. It shouldn't be the elephant in the room. We should have good dialogue and important conversation, recognizing that racism in and of itself is a public health crisis, not just the chronic disease outcome as the crisis. Let's look down at more upstream at the experience that leads to the downstream outcome of increased risk of chronic disease.